Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem ve aleyhi ve sellem. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So alhamdulillah, we've reached to our 11th halaqah.
And we're continuing with the afat.
And we're continuing with the afat al-lisan, detriments of the tongue. It's been called, it's been called for some time. And it's a lifelong struggle. So today we're going to look at two categories of afat al-lisan. Number one, revealing secrets. And similar to that, and in the same line, is breaking promises, lying in words and oaths. So revealing secrets, so a sir, if somebody says something to you, and they don't want that to be revealed to anyone, so that's an amana. So we're not allowed to reveal that to anyone, directly or indirectly. And this is a kind of a model. And unfortunately, most of us are very lax about that, you know. It doesn't matter who that happens to be with. So if somebody tells you something, and there's two ways. Maybe somebody says something to you and says, hey, don't tell anybody. So obviously, we're not allowed to tell anybody. Another thing is somebody mentions something to you that they don't say don't tell anybody, but it's the kind of information that they wouldn't want to be spread around. That's also to be able to understand and decipher that this is something that shouldn't be mentioned. So that is kitman sir, breaking promises, obviously. So all of this is a kind of khiyana, it's a kind of treachery, lack of trustworthiness. Breaking promises also, you know, this is, emphasized in the Quran, and it's also emphasized in the life of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's mentioned in hadith in the time of Jahiliyyah also. Prophet ﷺ had, because he was involved in business, so he had some kind of transaction, you know, with someone, and they promised to meet at such and such place. So Prophet ﷺ came there. He didn't show up, so he waited the whole day, he waited the second day, he waited 3 days for him. And then later, I think, maybe after Islam, Allah, ultimately he did meet the fellow. Just mentioned, you know, I waited a long time. So, keeping one's word, and this is, you know, prolifically mentioned in the Quran, it's a sifat of the mu'mineen. It's an imani sifat, it's a quality and characteristic of iman. It was lying in word and oaths. And if you remember, we had the, lying period is a terrible thing, you know, and Nabi also mentions, you know, that it was asked, can a mu'min, can he be stingy? Yeah. Can he be a coward sometimes? Jaban, yakun jaban? No. Yakun bakhilan? No. Yakun kadiban? No. So could he be, you know, stingy? Yeah, possible. Could he be cowardly? Possible. Could he tell lies? No. Because Iman is from sidq, Iman is from truth. So Iman and lying, they can't mix. So it's almost as a negation of one's Iman. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us, you know, and also in oaths. You know, we say, Wallahi this, Wallahi that, you know, so if you say, you take an oath, you take the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have to fulfill that. And if you break that, then there's a kafara for that, which is, you know, feeding 10, you know, masakeen, 10 poverty. Or fasting, if you can't do that, then you fast for 3 days just to expiate, you know, that oath that you broke, right? And you wouldn't want to do that anyway, except unless you find out, as Nabi Sallallahu says, if you take an oath, swear by Allah that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it manifests later on that taqwa is other than that. Or it would be more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to do that and take another course. And so in that case, you are to break your oath and expedite that, and expedite that, compensate for that by feeding 10 people, or clothing them, or fasting for 3 days. And even, so all of these things are forbidden. Revealing secrets, breaking promises, lying in words and oath, that's all forbidden. Is there any exception? Yes, there's an exception. There's always exceptions. So what are the exceptions? So, عن أسماء بنت يزيد رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يحل الكذب إلا في ثلاث يحدث الرجل امرأته ليرضيها والكذب في الحرب والكذب ليصلح بين الناس قال في حديثه ولا يصلح الكذب إلا في ثلاث. So Asma bint Yazid radiallahu anha, she narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, it is not lawful to lie except in 3 cases. Something the man tells his wife to please her. She's not really that beautiful, but she says, you should have gotten, the Miss World, the most beautiful thing on the planet. Well, actually, he's not telling a lie because maybe to him she is. So in any case, to please her. Not to get out of, trouble or something, but or to have some other ulterior motive. We're going to talk about the principle that, runs through all of these circumstances. So, something that he says like that to make his wife happy. Or to lie during the war. For example, one of our people, comes and hides in our house, and the enemy comes to your house. Okay, we're looking for so-and-so. Is he in your house? No. It's a lie. Right? But that's a lie that you have to do. We're going to find out in some cases it's actually wajib. Okay, so something like that, lie or tell you the enemy something. Nabi Sallallahu used to also, give the announcement that he's going in this direction. You would go in another direction. And as it's mentioned, that's the nature of war. So that's an exceptional case as well. Or to bring peace between the people. Somebody said this about so-and-so. No, actually, he's really sorry about that. Actually, he's not at all. But you go to him and you tell him, he was really sorry, and I actually told me that, actually, because I'm really unhappy, really so. So that's fine. People, someone who patches up, the relationships between 2 people, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates that and has promised a great reward. So that's also fine. Okay, so what's the rule here? The rule is a praiseworthy objective. If there's something that's praiseworthy and you can't achieve that objective except by telling something that's, not true, a lie, so in that case it's allowed. And then obviously the opposite, is if it's not a praiseworthy objective, then obviously it's not okay. And if an obligatory objective, suppose it's like we mentioned about saving the life of your, okay. So if it's an obligatory objective, not achievable except by a lie, it's obligatory. You have to, ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. That's a principle in fiqh that the obligatory thing that cannot be completed except by something else, that something else also becomes obligatory, like wudu. You can't offer salat without wudu. Now, wudu in itself is not wajib, but when you have to offer your salat becomes wajib, wudu becomes wajib because you cannot offer salat except by it. So in this case, yes, you would have to tell that lie to obligatory thing, like the issue that I mentioned, saving the life of somebody or something like that. So there's also mentioned in Hadith a very interesting story. It's kind of very humorous, and even Nabi Sallallahu was tickled by it. So Abdullah ibn Rawaha was also among the Ansar, and he was a great poet. He was a very famous poet, and he was known for his poetry, and Nabi Sallallahu used to appreciate his poetry as well. So back in those days, of course, they had their wives, and then they had their, their slave girls, So, and that is also lawful for them according to the rules and regulations. So he had actually gone off to one of his slave girls. So his wife was a bit hot-tempered, and so she came to find out about that. So she went and got a knife. She came and she caught him almost right in the act, So she said, okay, were you actually engaged in what looks like you were? He said, no. I didn't do anything. She said, okay, read the Quran, or otherwise I'm going to get you with this. Right? Because if he reads Quran, it means he has to have tahara. He couldn't have tahara if he hadn't done that. So he read some of his poetry, which is very beautiful poetry as well. So he said, وَفِينَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَتْلُو كِتَابًا إِذَا انشَقَّ مَعْرُوفٌ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ سَاطِعُ يَبِيتُ يُجَافِي جَنْبَهُ عَشِيهِ تَسْتَقْبَلَتْ بِالْكَافِرِينَ الْمَضَاجِعُ أرانا الهدى بعد العمى فقلوبنا به ممكنات أنه ما قال واقع. آمنت بالله وكذبت عيني. She said, I believe in Allah and my eyes have lied to me. So it also tells us a lot about the women. Their imams and how clever, the Sahaba. So, but it's a beautiful poetry actually. He says, and we have Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's with us, and he recites the verses of the Quran. He then shut the ma'ruf when the rays of Fajr start rising into the sky. يَبِيتُ يُجَافِي جَنْبَهُ عَنْ فَرَاشِهِ. He spends the night, in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when people are, putting their sides, it means their sides, they're laying and they're resting and they're enjoying their beds. So he lifts himself and prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the lifting becomes very difficult and very heavy for the believers. So he showed us the guidance after our blindness, so our hearts are certain that what he says is going to take place. So she said, She said, what? Amantu billahi wa kadhabat basari. I believe in Allah and my eyes told her. So this is and Nabi doesn't know when he told her that he also smiled. So obviously that to save the blood of some Muslim, his own, so that falls into that category. Okay, now the next one is that we want to talk about now. Okay, so in this case, one is allowed to tell a white lie, if you like. So now, however, even so, it's much better, and if possible, one should actually, say something elusive. We call it in Arabic tarwiyah. It's also called ma'arib. You're actually saying something which it could mean what people would generally think it to mean. That's not what you mean. You mean something else. That particular statement means that, For example, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, rahimahullah, who was the teacher of Abu Hanifa, great muhaddis and fuqaha of Kufa. So when people would come and they would disturb me. He was a very busy man, of course. And so he wouldn't want to be bothered. And so he wouldn't want to tell people he's not there. At the same time, he doesn't want to, he can't accommodate all the people who want to come and meet him because he's. So he told his servant that when People come, tell them, look for me in the masjid. So what does that mean? So the person who hears that will look for me, oh, he's in the masjid. He's not in the masjid. But he didn't say he's in the masjid, he said, look for me. So when you find me in the masjid, then so be it, If you don't find me there, well, you don't find me. Is that clear, everybody? So, and Nabi Sallallahu used to work Mustafa. And actually, when Nabi Sallallahu used to, he used to indicate that he was going in a particular direction, and he wouldn't generally announce that he's going here or there, but he would indicate, told you. So it wasn't a lie, actually. In Tabuk, there was an exception. Tabuk was an exceptional case. He really had to take every measure, to try baffle the enemy. It was a huge host contingent. So in any case, so if we have to, even in those three conditions where it's legal, still we should try and use what we call tawliya or ima'anil or illusion or ishara that actually wouldn't be, outright lying. It is a meaning that they would understand other than what we actually mean. Is that clear, everybody? Clear? So in any case, we don't want to tell lies in any case. And if you remember, this hadith came earlier on, right? وَبَيْتٌ فِي وَسْطِ الْجَنَّةِ لِمَنْ تَرَكَ الْكِذْبَ وَإِنْ كَانَ نَاسِيًا. There is some, mentioned among, other characteristics that a house in the middle of Jannah for the person who leaves kid lying, even in jesting, even in telling jokes. House in the middle of paradise for one who abstains from it, even while jesting. And of course, Nabi Sallallahu was the example of that. We talked about the story of Abdullah ibn Rawaha and Ibrahim al-Nakhi. We mentioned his story as well. So is that very clear, everybody? So those three areas, and those three areas, the principle is what? If there's an objective which is praiseworthy, it's something that it should be done, and we're praiseworthy to do it. We can't get it done unless we tell some type of white lie. Even in that case, tell a tawliya. Don't tell an outright lie, right? And if you must, then you must. Okay. Next, the biggest problem, backbiting, riba. And since in Ramadan, this is also something we have to be careful all the time, but particularly in Ramadan. And probably you've heard that hadith, if not, we'll look for our own reminder and sort of rebuke, if you will. So there were two women in Medina Munawwara, and it was during Ramadan, and they were fasting. And they were suffering so bad from hunger that they were fearing that they might actually expire. So this came to the attention of Rasulullah, at which point he gave a bowl actually to that person and said, take this to them and tell them to vomit into this bowl. So they both actually, they forced vomited into the bowl. And what came out in the vomit? Blood and meat. So this was brought back to Rasulullah. So he mentioned something more or less like this, that they had abstained from halal food. Right? Food is halal. It's just you've been fasting, you can't eat it. It's halal. But they were eating the haram flesh of their brothers or sisters, whoever it was that they were backbiting. This is actually a manifestation, actually in real time of what the Quran mentions. Would you like to eat the flesh of one's dead brother or sister? Definitely you wouldn't. So here Allah is, most forgiving and most merciful. And also there's many ahadith. There are hadith even that point to, even though those hadith are not very strong, there are hadith that point to riba is even more serious than zina and wine, things like that. Not in and of itself, perhaps, But perhaps yes, because why? As we probably mentioned earlier, those sins which have impact on others are more serious than the ones that only impact ourselves. For example, somebody goes in a room and drinks, and gets drunk. So the impact of that is on him. And then ultimately he comes back to he sobers up and then, carries on. Now, riba, this can have ramifications, that can lead even to warfare. Just as we saw in the Hadith al-Ifk, which Surah An-Nur, it's one of the main, in fact, the main, some of the nuzul for Surah An-Nur was this ifk, this lie, and it was basically a ghiba. It was worse than ghiba technically, it was actually buhtan. In هذا إلى بهتان. But it comes into the category when we look at the definition of riba, right? Nabi Sallallahu mentions, "Inna dima'akum wa amwalukum wa a'radukum haram alaykum ka'ummati yawmikum hadha fi baladikum hadha." So in the Hajjat al-Wada, if you remember, we probably mentioned this also in other places, that Nabi Sallallahu mentioned in his last khutbah, the last address to the people, that you people of Iman, your blood and your property and your honor, your dignity, they're all haram. And so obviously riba is striking at someone's dignity, right? Not only haram like, the days of Hajj in the Balad al-Haram, the day of Hajj, the day of Arafah. So it's a very serious offense. So we need to know, what is it? So what is riba? The definition is to mention one's brother or sister by something they dislike in their absence. And it so happens that thing that they dislike, it's true. It's true. If it's not true, like the ifk, like what, the rumor that was spread about Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, that is also, from that genus. In other words, it's saying something that someone disliked, but not only that, it was a total lie. So that gives it a double detrimental impact. And that particular ifk and that lie was also a form of riba, even worse. That came to the point that almost the Aus and Khazraj were about to again, attack one another because that ifk that was spread by the Munafiqeen. That story is a long one. So it's a very serious offense, and it causes tremendous social, detriment. Not to mention, the tabiyah, or the responsibility, the accountability, and in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the fact that it has such a detrimental impact. So that could be in many ways, shapes, or forms. You could mention somebody's physical appearance. So and so is short, so and so is fat, so and so has got a big belly, somebody's got a funny nose. What's the point? Why even mentioning these things? If anything, we mention the good about our brothers and sisters. We don't mention, from people of Iman, they say something good or they keep quiet. It could be their lineage, ethnicity, or any other relationship, like, calling you from such and such nation, or from such and such race, or you from low lineage, according to the way people look at them. Just anything which is going to have a derogatory connotation to that person. In other words, they don't want to be called by that. They don't want to be mentioned by that. They don't want anything like that. So that's all, going to be considered riba. And this is again, while they're not present. Not to say that when they're present, you can go ahead and say that. It's all the more heinous when you say that in their absence, where they can't defend themselves and they can't, clarify. Okay. Or say something about somebody's character. This person is very stingy. This person, talks a lot. This person, he upsets me. Why do you mention these things? What's the point? Apart from just being riba, what's the point? What's the benefit? There's none. There's only detriment. The dress. But did you see what so-and-so was wearing yesterday? What do you care what he's wearing? What does that have to do with you? Nothing. But what he liked or she liked, particularly ladies probably. But so we have to really think, this is the whole point in all these lessons, about 3 or 4 lessons we've had now. Think before we speak. Is this for me or against me? If it's for me, by all means. If it's against me, by all means not. And if it's a gray area, then sakat as-salim. If we're not sure, then who keeps quiet? He keeps safe. Okay? Any mention understood to be derogatory. Because nobody wants to be mentioned by something that is derogatory in any way, shape, or form. And if it's true, it's backbiting. And if it's not, it's slander. And that's even worse. Well, so this includes word, like saying something with your word. It also you write something. This happens a lot, in books where people have differences of opinion. And we have to be very careful with talabat al-ilm and ahl al-ilm and what we write. Even if we differ with someone, we have to be careful that we don't involve ghiba in that difference. Like calling names. Look at this. Where's his aql? Where's his? Is this person a faqih and he said this? What's the point? And the qudwa, as I've mentioned probably in other majalis, if you look at the Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala and his commentary of Sahih Muslim, which is the volumes, like this, see, I used to teach that book and I used to look at that quite often. I don't recall any place in that entire book, whatever I saw, where he mentioned anything derogatory to anyone, even people who are really outlandishly wrong, He would mention the stance, he would mention, the proof, or the evidence for or against. And if anything, he would ask Allah give us guidance. Understand? This is what says. This is all we're saying. And therefore, when you read that, it produces a respect for the people who read it. So you're actually not only respecting everyone and even their opinions, even if they're dead wrong, but that also breeds an environment of respect and honor. So if we write things that are respectful, then it would breed respectability. So in writing as well, also in gesture, So, and even a gesture was mentioned in Surah Al-Anfal, لا تخونوا الله ورسوله وتخونوا أماناتكم. When the Bani Qurayza, I suppose, and so they were asking one of their sahabas who was in alliance with them, what's going to happen to us? And then he realized, and then this ayat came out. Mention things that are not supposed to be mentioned. So even gestures, if they're, a gesture is understood like this also could be. So it's quite delicate, right? So I think probably we're all looking and, taking account of ourselves and saying, oh, myself. So, this one will excuse us, And then we're going to see in the end of this because there's a lot to we're going to see ultimately that if we do fall into this pit, we need to get out, and we do that by actually taking excuse from the person that we accosted or that we offended. And we'll talk about that a bit later, inshallah. Or even an allusion. As we said before, that allusion and the poria, So even to allude and it could possibly be understood something detrimental about that person, that also, 100%, if you will, 110%, we just need to stay away from this. It's so serious. And it has such detrimental impacts on relationships. So we really want to be careful. And then the last thing we want to talk about, just a little bit delicate here. The worst form of backbiting, is the ostentatious pious. The people who are pious, they're ostentatious about it. He calls them, al-muta'abbidin, al-mutazahidin, al-ra'in. People who put on like they're pious, but it's all show. So somebody's mentioned that, somebody did this, somebody did that. Allah who saved me from these things. Or, sometimes people say this, so-and-so, make dua for him. Poor guy, did this. What did he do? I'm not going to say anything, but just make dua for him. So you obviously, so this is the worst, because what's happening here is, Alhamdulillah has protected me from the sin of so and so, I'm so holier than thou, And then I see modesty. In other words, somebody's, doing something immodest. Oh, I see. Like I'm so modest and he's so, unmodest. So actually what it is that it's a combination of criticizing the other, and in that case, they're absolutely riba, and then at the same time, pride for oneself, praising oneself, which is nearly as bad, if not just as bad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from all of these things. And we're all guilty of these things, myself included. So we really need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to excuse us and give us tawfiq to control this tongue. As Abu Bakr says, هذا الذي أوردني الموارد. This is the one that has taken me to the very, very, very terrible, events, or taking me on the brink of destruction. So this month we give us all tawfiq. And since it's such an important subject, so probably we'll be continuing this for a couple of sessions more, inshallah ta'ala, will be a tawfiq. Any questions? Any comments on our social media side?
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna cover this, but for the listener.
Yeah.
No, okay, the person who doesn't want to listen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't. That's hard, Shaykh.
Here it is. Just click the next slide. In fact, I forgot to. We're supposed to actually cover that. Listener as guilty as perpetrator. Listener is guilty as. Okay, so what does he have to do? So either he has to get up and walk away. Best he objects. Hey, don't talk to people. But you would do well to say it in such a way that's palatable. Whether really is that necessary to say something like that? That's illegal. It's very bad. So may Allah excuse us all and save us from this kind of say things like that. So we need to object to that. So if you can, change it with your hand. We don't need to change anything with a hand here. You're not gonna, you're going to do it with your tongue. You could object, And if that's not possible, or for whatever reason, then at least with your heart. Okay, and if you can't do that, then get up and walk away. Don't stay sitting there. Or change the topic at least. That's also, mentioned in the Quran. They start talking now, blasphemy, then don't sit with them unless the subject changes. Something blasphemous. Okay, is that clear? Oh, okay. So we'll hear this later because I think we've gone past our time. People are getting so, as I said, this is going to carry on inshallah for a few more sessions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. Any other question? Yeah.
What happens if there is a conflict between two people and they both somebody tell them?
Yeah, so that's going to come in the upcoming session because there's times when khiba is actually necessary. For example, when the hadith, in narrating of hadith, we have to know everything about individuals who narrate the hadith. So if there's something that this narrator was doing that negates his credibility, so that has to be brought to light. So that is a wajib riba. Now we're talking about haram riba. There's not some wajib that has to be observed to. Here, rights of people are at stake, and so perhaps that, so we're going to talk about that in detail, inshallah, in the coming session. Any other questions? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك